To graph any function, a fallback method that always works is to make a table. So that's what we're going to do in this example, and I'll show you some strategies for organizing that table and picking your inputs. So let's go ahead and just make the table first. So now that I have everything set up, let's remember what a function is. A function is a tool for finding an output given an input. It's a way of relating the input and output. So for example here, in this first one, I want to know the value of y, and I know that y is just equal to 3 times whatever x is less 1. Well, in this case, I know what x is. It is a -1. In which case I do a little bit of arithmetic and I can easily find that y is in fact just equal to -4. So usually when I'm making a table like this, I'll go ahead and just kind of write out the template for my function, putting parentheses where the x is so that I can easily make those calculations. So now I've gone ahead and just filled out my template. I'm going to go ahead and fill in the inputs. And really quickly, the reason I chose these inputs is that most graphs are kind of centered around the origin here. They don't have to be, but usually the most interesting things in the graph, or at least some of the interesting things, happen there. So with a linear function, I always center it more or less around the input of x equals 0. It's not something you have to do, but it's something that tends to be fairly useful. So now let's go ahead and do the calculations and we'll find our y values. And lastly, we can write all of these as points. This last step is just because I want you to explicitly see the relationship that we just found. If you can read it without writing these out, clearly you can go ahead and plot the points from here. All right, so now we have 4 points. That should give us plenty to get a good idea of what this graph looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and label those points so that you can more easily follow along. And here we can clearly see that this makes a line. Okay, they all have the same, what is called the slope, which means they're increasing as we go from point to point. They're increasing in both the x and y directions at the same rate, which we'll talk about more later. Okay? But the important thing to remember here is that the way we can figure out how to graph any function is simply by drawing a table where we plug in inputs or x's and figure out what the corresponding y values are.